great things about me because he's my surgeon and my doctor, and he wants to keep me as a patient, or at least get some more referrals for him. But he is a terrific doctor, and he's actually heading up a special unit at Swedish Hospital doing this, what they call very micro surgery, and getting people back on their feet very, very quickly and with very minimal discomfort and pain. It's really great to see so many people here, especially in this time of angst in America, and to be here for Andrew. I got to meet Andrew about 2 years ago at a dinner in Washington, D.C., and he gave a speech, and he just mesmerized the entire crowd, just as I know that he will mesmerize you. As Jeff indicated, I grew up in the Escala Terrace housing project, which was public housing. We lived there for about 4 or 5 years until my dad was able to build a house on Beacon Hill, where the family home is still there. But it was public housing for returning World War II vets, as well as the students at the University of Washington. My grandfather came to the United States in the late 1800s and worked as a servant for a family in the state capitol. He was from China, went back to China, got married, had a family where my father was born, came back to the United States and back to Seattle and worked as a chef at Virginia Mason Hospital. And it was Doc Mason who told my grandfather, you should go back to China and bring your entire family over. So Grandpa did that and brought my dad over when he was about 12 or 13 years old. And then just before the outbreak of World War II, Dad volunteered for the United States Army as part of the Normandy invasion, part of the Battle of the Bulge, and the blitz to Berlin to try to beat the Russians to Berlin. And after the war was over, he went to Hong Kong, met my mom, and got married and brought her over, and we were all born. And I say all of this because when I was sworn in as governor in 1997, I said that here I am moving into the governor's mansion, exactly 1 mile from the house where my grandfather swept floors and washed dishes as a servant boy. And I said that here we are, moving into the governor's mansion, and it's taken our family 100 years to go 1 mile. And I said that this is the story of not just our family, but the story of every American. Except for the Native Americans, we are all foreigners. Whether we're first generation or 10th generation, whether our ancestors came on the Mayflower, on a slave ship, or on a boat from China, we are all foreigners to this country, and we are a land of immigrants. And it is that diversity of people, of cultures, of languages, of religions, and perspectives that makes America great. And it's that constant renewal, that enrichment of our spirit that has enabled us to be the most innovative country in the world. That diversity, celebration of diversity, what makes America truly great, is under attack with President Trump. When you see all the moral lapses, the ethical lapses, the disregard for our own history and what America stands for, when you see that he's putting personal politics over foreign relations and dismantling all the progress that we have made under both Republican and Democratic presidents over the last several years, we need a person who can stand up to him, who can demonstrate care for each and every one of us, and that's what Andrew stands for. A successful entrepreneur. He understands the challenges of the future. You know, McKinsey says that in about 10 years, 5 to 10% of the entire world's workforce will be displaced because of AI and robotics. Now that means that the people who are 40 years old today, 10 years from now, may not have a job. We can say the new economy is going to create all these new jobs, but are we going to say that the person who's 50, 55 years old is going to go back to college for a course in coding? No. We need a person in the White House who's anticipating this, envisioning these problems, based on his background, who will give us assurances, a program that gives us hope and optimism. And that's why this candidacy by Andrew is so exciting. So exciting. He's got novel ideas. He's going to stand up to the president, and it's great to have all of you here supporting his candidacy and urging him on. And for all the Asian Americans here, we cannot be more proud to have an Asian American, a person of color, finally on the presidential stage. Thank you very much, Andrew, for
governor, as secretary in the cabinet. I thought, wow, that's incredible. And now to be introduced by you, it's such an honor and privilege. I feel like the torch is being handed off to me, and I know exactly what to do with it, Gary. Thanks, Seattle. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here. I have to say that Seattle is one of the first cities that really embraced me in the campaign. And that's in large part because of people like Hetty Young, and Jeff, and Grace, and Carrie, and John. And I'm missing a couple. Eric and Susie. It's people like you that have really made this campaign possible and made it take flight. When I started this campaign, no one was exactly knocking down Andrew Yang's door saying you should run for president. The literal response was, president of what? And my email list was literally my Gmail contact. Except I'll be like, hey, I'll run for president. Send money here. Well, that was 2 long years ago, around the same time that Gary and I met. And I stand before you. Today a poll just came out. I'm 5th in the polls to become president of the United States. Nationwide. And I'm flying straight from here to Los Angeles, where I'll be on the national debate stage as the lone person of color. And I will be candid that one of the reasons I decided to run for president was I imagined what my being on that debate stage would mean to the Asian American community. Imagining myself, because I grew up in this country in the 70s and 80s, and anytime there was an Asian American on TV, I would jump up and down excitedly, and I would yell to my brother and mom, look, look, it's an Asian on TV. It was almost always Connie Chung. But then imagining what someone tuning in would look at. I remember reading about how small black children, when they came of age and then Barack Obama stopped being president, they were like, you mean he's not always president? Because they came of age just assuming that, like, he's president, he's black, and that's the way it always is. It gives me a lot of pride thinking about Asian American children turning on the TV, seeing me on the debate stage, and assume that Asian Americans always run for president. And that was one of my goals when I embarked on this journey, and I'm very happy to say that that has come true for the 6th time on Thursday. But just like a good son of immigrants, I'm getting greedy. Where the better you do, the more you see the goal in sight. This field is very, very fluid. Anyone who looks at the numbers sees that the buy-in for any of the 4 frontrunners is very, very low. The majority of candidates say they could change their minds. Majority of voters say they could change their minds. Majority of candidates, that'd be funny. I'll wake up and be like, I'm not sure about this running for president. A majority of voters say they could change their minds. Even people that say they're committed to a particular candidate say, like, I'm still not sure. I just came from a bus tour in Iowa, and I can verify that it is still way up in the air. That people are still figuring out where they're going to put their vote. And people say this reminds them of the most fluid field in 14 years or so, 16 years. 2003, John Kerry was at 4% in December, and he went on to win, and someone looked and said, this is just like that field. So we are growing when other candidates are, frankly, pulling back or even dropping out. We raised $10 million in the last quarter in increments of only $30 each. So this is a very cheap, wholesome gang to join. Our fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. That's not you all. You all are like $30. That's significantly more. I must be a well above average member of the gang now. Which you all really are. And I'm not going to break any news with this. We're going to raise significantly more in Q4 than we raised in Q3. So again, we're growing when other candidates are pulling back. And we have a very clear message. And the message is still somehow unique in this field where we are laser focused on solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. Now, if you turn on cable news, why would you think Donald Trump's our president today? Russia, racism, Hillary Clinton, emails, Facebook, the FBI, all sort of mixed together in some cocktail. But I'm a numbers guy. How many of y'all work in technology? This is Seattle. I figure a bunch of you. So if you work in technology and you're the analytical sort, you realize that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs that were based in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And what we did to those jobs is still ongoing. Where Amazon alone is closing 30% of America's stores and malls and paying zero in taxes while doing it. How many of y'all work for Amazon? It's okay. Yeah! I will say, Amazon is one of the top employers of people who donate to my campaign. Because you all know what you're doing. I mean, heck, Jeff just walks around. Jeff walks around being like, you know your job is to make your own job obsolete. And everyone's like, we know, Jeff, we know. Closing 30% of the stores and malls around the country and being a retail clerk is the most common job in this nation. The average retail clerk's a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $10 an hour. So when her store closes, what is her next move going to be? And I say very plainly, there are going to be many wondrous new jobs that get created in the months to come. But they're going to tend to be for different people in different places with different skills and in smaller numbers than the retail clerks and the fast food workers and the truck drivers and the warehouse shelvers. It's going to be different jobs for different people in different places. Here we are in Seattle. This city is frankly one of the biggest beneficiaries of these trends because this is one of the technology capitals, one of the knowledge hubs. This is going to be a place, and you all have seen it. You've seen the city transform over the last number of years and decades, where what started out as sort of a grungy port town. Remember this? No, some of you don't remember this. And then you've had this sort of Blade Runner technology overlay like over the 90s city. And there are times, I'm sure, while you're going to work where you think this is utopia, and then there are other times where you think this is dystopia. You know, because that is the nature of what's going on in our economy. It's one of the most extreme winner-take-all economies in the history of the world at this point. And the rest of the country is feeling it in different ways, but for whatever reason, our political system is not responding. Our media industrial complex is not digging in and trying to figure out the facts. We're going through the greatest economic transformation in our country's history, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician even say the words fourth industrial revolution? Just now, Seattle! And I'm barely a politician.
Not
so
a Brand X politician.
Having a clear sense of the problems and a clear vision of what the solutions can and should be is how someone goes from completely anonymous to fifth in the polls to be president of the United States. And this message, thanks to people like you, I will tell you exactly where your money is going to get spent. It's going to be given to a TV station in Iowa or New Hampshire. And then we're going to be taking this message to them. And I have to say the appetite for this message is very, very high. The Iowans, the people in New Hampshire, they see what's going on around them. If you're into politics, I get the sense some of you are really into politics. Raise your hand if you're really into politics. Somewhat unusual in the Yang Gang, you should know. But the people who didn't raise their hand, like, totally normal. But Iowa's a traditionally purple state, as swingy as it gets. And Donald Trump won it by 8 points. So the folks in Iowa are looking around saying, what the heck is going on? So the appetite for this message is very, very high, because this is a much clearer and more real explanation of what's going on in Iowa than anything else anyone's talking about. They lost 40,000 manufacturing jobs in Iowa alone. I've been to the towns that have gotten blasted away from the factory and the plant closing, and they've never recovered. When the plant closes, the shopping district closes, people start moving away, and blue goes to red in an awful hurry. That's how you go from purple to Trump winning by 8 points. What I say to the folks in Iowa is you saw it happen on your farms and then your factories, now it's going to your main streets, and eventually it will hit your highways. And that's when people are like, highways? And I say, yeah, self-driving trucks. It's going to be devastating to the 3.5 million Americans who drive trucks for a living and the 7 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out having a meal. I love hanging out with you all because you are what I call the moral elite, frankly. Folks here in Seattle who are going to be on the cutting edge of this technological wave, but you're looking out for an interest bigger than your own. You're saying, this is my country, I see what is happening to it, and I want to do something about it. That is what drove me into the campaign as well. I looked up and said, our country does not understand what is happening. We are scapegoating immigrants for things that immigrants have nothing to do with. And we have to get the attention focused on the real problems of this era, the real challenges. Some of you are wearing math hats. What does math stand for?
Make America think harder.
Make America think harder, that's right. That is your job, Seattle. With your money, we're going to help America think harder.
Yeah.
And then focus on the real problems and help provide a new way forward that we can all be excited about. In 2016, Donald Trump became our president. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response?
America's already great.
America's already great. Remember that, Seattle? It's been a long 3 years. We have to acknowledge the depth and severity and reality of the problems that many Americans are experiencing. The fact is, even as corporate profits are at record highs and GDP are at record highs, also at record highs in this country, anxiety, stress, depression, financial insecurity, even suicides and drug overdoses. It has gotten so bad that America's life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years in a row. Do you know when the last time that happened in America? The Spanish flu of 1918. That's right, a global pandemic that killed millions. We are back in Spanish flu territory because of drug overdoses and suicides. This is one reason why when Hillary said, America's already great, millions of Americans heard that and said, wait, like is it? They looked around and said, I'm not sure if that's true. Like, I see the people in my community struggling, I see the store closing, I see my own children suffering. If you were born in this country in the 1940s, there was a 93% chance that you were going to be better off than your parents. If you're born in the 1990s, you're down to a 50-50 shot. And if you're born after that, guess which way the curve's going? Below 50%. So when Donald Trump said he was going to make America great again, Hillary Clinton said it's already great, that did not ring true to many Americans. What we have to do is we have to acknowledge the problems and then say we need new solutions. What were Donald Trump's solutions?
Fear.
We're going to build a wall, we're going to turn the clock back, we're going to bring the old jobs back. Seattle, you know better than just about anyone else in the country, we need to do the opposite of these things. We need to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the challenges of the 21st century. And we need to evolve in the way we think about ourselves and our work and our value as people. And I'm the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much, Seattle. We are going to fight, commit, sacrifice, and we are going to make history together in 2020. Are you with me? It's going to be fun. We've got a lot of great things on tap. Thank you all so much. I love you all.
Hi, Eric and Susan. Yeah. I'm Eric, got us. Great to see you both. See you as well. Where would you like me?
Maybe in the middle.
Sure. There you go.
And I don't know if it's mic'd. Should I get the mic on?
Oh, it's Q&A.
Feel
Front row.
Great.
Did you do that now?
Not exactly. No, I just don't want to.
So thank you so much. My name is Susie Levine. This is my husband Eric. We are Deputy National Finance Chairs for the DNC. And what we've been focusing on is how we can build the infrastructure that whoever becomes the nominee can get, so that when you get the nomination, you have robust technology, you have robust grassroots organizing, and you have a pathway to win. And it's going to take all of us investing in this infrastructure in order to be able to help us win. And winning doesn't just mean winning the White House, it means taking back the Senate, it means holding the House, and it means flipping state legislatures so that we can fight the gerrymandering that has really also gotten us into the situation that we're in today. So we've created a salon series over the past 8 months that has allowed individuals to meet the different candidates. And we've asked consistent questions at that salon series to the different candidates. And so we thank you so much, Hedy Young, for allowing us to pose these questions to Andrew Yang today. It's such a pleasure. And so we're going to just kick right into it. So first.
Okay, so what is your best campaign pitch to the 100,000 or so swing voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania who voted for Trump in 16 but voted for Obama in 12?
I think I just hit that message. I'm very excited to say. First, I just want to commend you for doing the work for the DNC, because it's true, we need the DNC to have robust infrastructure and up-to-date technology and data if we're going to fight to win, regardless of who the nominee is. And what you're all doing is less sexy and less glamorous, but more concrete and applicable. How many of you all are operators, entrepreneurs? So you all know what they're doing is the important stuff, the stuff that other people overlook. So I just want to give them a round of applause on that. Oh, true. I'm just doing an event with people about the DNC and we talk about this very thing. And the reality is that the DNC right now is underfunded relative to the RNC, and so the work you're all doing, I know it's not easy, because when you shake the can and say, hey, donate to the DNC, people are like, I'd rather give to this candidate and have them come show up and hang out with me, because it's a little more fun. So you should do the less fun thing and give the DNC money as well. So the pitch to these swing voters is to say, look, I get it, your factory has closed, your main street is closing, your kids are addicted to either smartphones or drugs or both, and for whatever reason, the Democrats feel like they're condescending to you, and that they're saying that the problem is that you're using the wrong language or that there are like cultural issues you're ignorant of, and it's pissing you off. I get it. What we have to do is rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to include you, your family, your community. Stop confusing economic value and human value, which is the subtext of so much of what we're doing, and say your country loves you, your country values you, and you and your kids are going to be all right.
Thank you. The next question, could you please speak to your approach for handling key geopolitical powers, including Russia, China, and Europe, and your experience with foreign policy that informs it?
I signed a pledge to end the forever wars. If you look at our Constitution, it's in Congress's power to declare war, but then they ceded that authority to the executive branch 18 years ago with the AUMF. And at this point, we've been in a constant state of armed conflict for 18 years and counting. It was James Mattis that said if you invest more in diplomacy, then you have to buy less ammunition. And that to me is exactly what we should be doing. We should be investing in our diplomats and the State Department and our alliances and partnerships abroad. If you look at the chain of events, what happened? We started falling apart at home. We voted in Donald Trump, who's now erratic and unreliable even to our closest allies. And the rest of the world's throwing up their hands saying, I'm not even sure if America is good for its word or its commitment, even something that's been in place for decades. Can you imagine the sigh of relief when the pendulum swings the other way and the rest of the world's like, wow, they turned that around in an awful hurry? Because now you have the rational internationalist who wants to try and rebuild our partnerships and alliances, make us strong and sound at home, take the $650 billion or so we're spending on the military-industrial complex, try and spend it on things that will make us actually safer and more secure in the 21st century around things like infrastructure, and try and secure our election equipment from Russian hacking, and try and rebuild a world order that has benefited the U.S. greatly over the last number of decades. So to the specific threats you described, Russia's not an economic threat, but they found an underbelly in terms of our election infrastructure. We need to do our best to secure that, but I've talked to the folks who are in the tech companies and on our election equipment, and it's going to be almost impossible to secure it by 2020, especially because this administration has zero interest in actually investing in it. So after I'm president, I will make those investments, but I'll also send a very clear, unambiguous message to Russia saying, if you continue to try and undermine our democracy, we will take it as an act of hostility and aggression, and we will respond very unkindly, and I believe the American people would support me on that. For China, the big concern to me is that they're set to leapfrog us in artificial intelligence. There's an AI joke that we used to tell. It was, how far behind is China from the US in AI? And the answer was 12 hours. Because they would wake up and see what we did. Now, unfortunately, they have more access to more data than we do because they have essentially non-existent privacy protections and they have more interactions. And so their algorithms are set to get smarter faster, in part because they also have billions of dollars in computing infrastructure that the government has subsidized for their private firms. I've sat with our leading technologists here in the US and they tell me flat out, they're like, look, we can spend $2, $3, $4 billion, but we can't match the Chinese government and we're concerned about it. So the best way to manage our relationship with China is to outcompete them. I would partner with our tech firms. I would say, look, we will match the resources if you allow us to have someone you respect in the room to make sure you don't do something disastrous. Where one of the leading technologists in our country said to me that he actually wanted a government regulator somewhere in the vicinity because all of the company's incentives are to go as fast as possible. And he said that is a path to disaster for us if you have 4 or 5 tech firms all going as fast as possible in artificial intelligence. This is a very famous technologist. His name's Elon. But if you have a technologist like Elon actually saying, look, our incentives are wrong on this, you really have to listen. Because these technologists aren't exactly calling for government guidelines most of the time. So at that point, we're overdue. We're 24 years behind on technology. We need to catch up as quickly as possible. And that's going to be the best way that we can actually manage a competitive relationship with China moving forward.
I just want to quickly, as a former diplomat, thank you for recognizing the importance of our diplomacy. And so I served as our U.S. ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And so...
you got some good assignments, Susan.
Okay, so the last of our standard questions, and it's we've been again asking this of everyone from Vice President Biden and every other campaign. So what will you do to ensure that all of those who are supporting you also commit to and turn out to support the eventual nominee if for some reason that doesn't end up being you?
I'm on the record that job one is getting Donald Trump out of office. We have to fight to make sure that happens. I will support whoever the nominee is in that mission, regardless of whether I'm the nominee or not. And I believe I can be very helpful because this campaign is activating many people who are disaffected Trump voters and independents and libertarians and Asian Americans. And we all know Asian Americans participate in politics at lower levels than other groups. Vote less, donate less, run for office less.
Not now.
Not now. Well, thank you.
Not
I'm hoping we can do something about that.
now.
So I believe I can be helpful in defeating Donald Trump if I'm not the nominee. One of the things I said to someone was like, look, I'm pro-civilization. If you're pro-civilization, we gotta get that guy out.
Yeah.
Well, that exhausts the questions.
That's the
that we
standard
had.
questions. Hetty Young, did you want to try to take questions from the
I would like it
audience?
if you could spend a little time taking questions from the audience. So,
Would love that.
yes. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Yang, are you aware that whoever is elected in 2020 had, well, Charles Osgood years ago said on the radio, forget your dreams about becoming a millionaire. This is regarding retirement investment. He said at the very end, you better be, regarding being a millionaire. Whoever is elected president in 2020, forget dreams about eclipsing Abraham Lincoln as our best president. You better be, whoever is elected in 2020.
Do you have a question, sir?
That was my question. Is Andrew Yang aware that whoever is elected in 2020 had better be the best president of the United States, or we're going down in the uproaring 2020s?
I agree with the fact that this is a very tough time for the country, and that we need to bring Americans together in new ways. We all see the gridlock in Washington. We see that our government is decades behind the curve and not solving the real problems. And I think it's going to take a figure like me, who has zero corporate PAC money. People can tell this is a purely grassroots and people-funded campaign, to help clean up the mess, bring people together from both sides of the aisle. And I'm happy to say that many Republicans have said to me they're switching sides to vote for me in the primary in some of the early states, in part because they sense that I'm non-ideological, I'm solutions-oriented, I just want to try and move the country forward. And that, I believe, is exactly what that country needs. So I'm not the sort of person who would pit myself against some of the great presidents of the past. I'm not a legacy guy, I'm a problem-solving guy. And I'm excited to get that mindset into Washington, a town that sorely needs it.
That's a good answer.
So I have two questions, but I really want everybody to hear what you have to say. One is about GDP, because you raised it, and today there was a graph in the New York Times showing that GDP has never been so apart from wages than it has been now. So we really need a new system for calculation. And also I want you to talk about the climate crisis. We just closed down a miserable COP26.
Thank you for both of those questions. I'll stand up. So I did refer to the fact that GDP is heading to record highs even as our life expectancy is declining. And the point that GDP and wages have diverged is just going to get more extreme. And those of you who work in technology know that you can have a very successful company today that doesn't hire thousands of people, that doesn't give them full-time wages and benefits. Entrepreneurs today tell me, they say, wow, I would have hired someone to do my bookkeeping X years ago, but now I've got this subscription. I would have hired an HR department, but now I've got Gusto. You know, that's happening with businesses around the country. That's the explanation for the productivity and wages diverging. So instead of GDP, which is a century-old measurement that even the inventor said was a terrible measurement of national well-being and we should never use it as that, we have to evolve to 21st century measurements that would tell us how our people are doing. Things like mental health and freedom from substance abuse, clean air and clean water, childhood success rates, life expectancy and wellness. And then you would see that we're in a mental health depression, we're in a wellness depression, we're in a trust depression, we're in a volunteerism depression. All of the things that make a community strong are actually heading the opposite direction. How many of you all run an organization or department? Imagine if you had the wrong measurements for that organization, how would you do over time? Pretty badly. So that's where we are as a country. It's imperative that we update our measurements to what I call human-centered capitalism for the 21st century. And I will present the real numbers to you all in a PowerPoint deck every year at the State of the Union, so we can see how we work.
PowerPoint, 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 PowerPoint.
Yes, if you like that visual, you're definitely part of the Yang Gang. Oh, I'm sure you're all deeply concerned about climate change, and we have to move very, very quickly in the right direction. How many of you saw the debate where I staked out the third position on climate change in Detroit? Remember this? Oh yeah. Where position number 1 is we have to fight climate change. Position number 2 is it's a hoax we don't need to worry about. And then Andrew Yang's position number 3, it's worse than you think. We're decades behind.
Higher ground.
Move to higher ground. We do need to move to higher ground. The best immediate step we can take is to put a price on carbon emissions, because we all know firms will respond very quickly to financial incentives that have them improve their energy signature and their composition. We have to take the tens of billions of dollars in fossil fuel subsidies and move them to wind and solar and renewable forms of energy. The toughest part of this is that the United States of America only accounts for 15% of global emissions, and what's happening in the rest of the world is that China is going to Africa and saying, hey, we've got a coal-burning power plant for you. What do you think? And then what does the African government say? Sure. We love it. Energy, cool. So what do we have to do to change that decision? We have to be at the table and say, hey, don't take the coal-burning power plant. Take these solar panels, and we will subsidize them to a point where it's a no-brainer for you. We subsidize a lot of other exports. We need to start subsidizing solar panels and renewable forms of energy to try and move the other 85% in the right direction. Realistically, even if we start doing everything right immediately, we're going to need to invest tens, hundreds of billions of dollars in making our communities more resilient. I have been around the country and I've seen the impacts, where in New Hampshire there's a multi-million-dollar shrimping business that went to zero because the water got warm and all the shrimp died. In Iowa, there are still communities that are recovering from the floods that were unprecedented. it's more expensive to clean something up after the fact than it is to try and build the levees or prepare communities. So we need to start investing immediately. There's a proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the second best time is today. We should have done this 20 years ago, but the time is now. I'm also the only candidate in the field that is championing a constitutional amendment that says it's the responsibility of our government to safeguard the environment for generations to come. But it's a lot. It's going to be bad. Big picture, climate change is going to cost us trillions of dollars and thousands of lives. And that's what we have to convey to the American people, is that doing nothing is the most expensive choice in front of us. Other questions?
I got a question on UBI. When we talk to other people and they bring up where it has not done well, like in Europe, how do I get them over the line?
So the question's about universal basic income, and the question is, what are the results around the world? The European trials you're describing had many, many incredibly positive data points associated with it. Higher levels of mental health, lower stress, higher contentment, even higher trust in others. The only measurement that stayed stable was number of work hours, which is something you would not expect to increase unless you were to implement it community-wide. So to think of that as a failure is actually a very strange standard. I looked at every implementation of basic income I could find, and the effects are uniform, where people's mental health improves, kids go to school more, hospital visits go down, and if you put it in effect community-wide, you see an economic multiplier effect. So the European trials did not do it community-wide, so I would try and distinguish between certain types of trials and others. And at that point, they'll be like, this is too complicated, just send me to a YouTube video, and then I'll sit there and make America think harder. Right. I'm sorry. I like to go man-woman, so here you go.
Hey, so I was wondering, Trump has passed the Autism Act, and it was created by Autism Speaks, which among the neurodiversity community is considered a hate group. And I was wondering,
Looks like he did.
and I was wondering what you would replace the Autism Act with, given that you have a autistic kid.
Thank you, Natalie. I do have a son on the spectrum, and to me, being special needs is the new normal. And when you said this, I was like, he signed the Autism Act? Like, what did it say? And then when he said, like, it was not positive, I was like, oh, that's why I haven't heard anything good about it. So first, being open about our own family, I think, is at least a starting point. But the important thing is getting resources into the hands of communities, where I talk to families who have autistic children or special needs children, and they have a really difficult time getting meaningful resources from their school districts that are often under-resourced. So we have to put those resources into place at the federal level so that communities aren't making really tough decisions where it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and to try and support families at the ground floor, from getting the diagnosis initially when the child is preferably as young as possible, to supports before they start school. My wife and I are so passionate about it because we've seen what services and intervention can do for children early on, and many, many families do not have the ability to access that. So that's what we have to change. Again, if you actually use human capital as your measuring stick, then inaction becomes very expensive. There are many things that happen when you start using human capital as your measurements. Number one, school teachers get paid more because they're worth their weight in gold. Because if they can improve educational outcomes for many kids over the years, then that's actually like an incredible economic driver. The same is true in terms of special needs families. The cost of someone not getting services is actually much, much higher than the cost of them getting the services they need. So I would pass a genuine autism and special needs families act that puts those resources into communities where they can do the most good.
Thank you.
We've got one more question. Partial towards people wearing math hats. So go ahead.
So I work for myself. I'm a immigrant from China, so I'm also Canadian citizen because I immigrated there first. So I have no doubt that you will be next president. Can you tell me what will happen in 2024 after your first term? I mean, in your view, what will be changed?
I love that question. By 2024, we will have gotten the measurements right. We will see the depth of our real problems, and then we will start putting resources to work and trying to move us in the right direction. Where if you have 8 Americans dying of drug overdoses every hour, which is the case right now, that's completely unacceptable. So we need to try and make those communities stronger and more whole, and make it so that that overdose rate comes down by 50% by 2024.
Yes.
And it's not just that measurement, it's mental health, it's life expectancy, it's well-being, it's drug prices. You put the right measurements in place, you can actually do a lot of good very, very quickly. Because right now, one of the problems is we don't actually see the rot, the disintegration in many of our families and communities. We're going to have economic buying power in more people's hands so that there's a reversal of this mindset of scarcity that is bringing us down. Right now, to me, the mindset of scarcity is keeping us from making meaningful progress on climate change and many other things, where studies have shown that if you can't pay your bills, and 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, almost half can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. When you're living in that kind of dire straits, studies have shown that it lowers your functional IQ by 13 points, or 1 standard deviation. So if the people here in this room have the sneaking feeling that our fellow citizens are getting less reasonable, less rational, less optimistic, and more subject to bad ideas and bad leadership, we almost certainly are, because that is what you would expect in a country with pervasive financial insecurity. So by 2024, we will have gotten the boot off of at least some of our fellow Americans' throats, and it will restore a sense of abundance and optimism and possibility, and help to knit this country back together from its current hyperpolarized state. All right, thank you, Seattle. I love you all so much. And you know who else I love? I love the volunteers who volunteered. I'm a thing they're going to be on too. So come on up here, volunteers. We're going to take a picture. Anyone with a brown ribbon. So I think that includes all sorts of fun people. But come on up with a brown ribbon. Ah, looking good.
I don't know if you remember
Yes.
Brandon, but he spoke at our...
I do remember. So for those of you who are looking enviously at this beautiful t-shirt or the math hats or anything else, it's Yang2020.com. You just buy it up. And this is what's going on here.
Brown ribbon? Brown ribbons! Okay.
Brown ribbon,
That's it.
people.
Just
Are you too busy working hard? It's cool.
Just get these two.
Just these two? All right.
Yeah, these are good. These are good.
Works for me.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you, crew. I'll stick around.
Thank you, Seattle. My mic is cut. It's the Russians. I love you all.
Thank you. You are awesome. Gonna go to. We gotta go, everyone. Sorry. We got a flight to catch.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, everybody. We gotta catch our flight. Take care of
Yes, we were. Angelie, how are you? Of course. We're always so badass. Angelie's a black belt taekwondo.
We gotta run.
They were classmates.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. That didn't work so well. Sorry.
Got one, Ashley. Good job, Ashley.
Godspeed to you, Andrew Yang! Thanks for watching.